the closest approximation I can give people to, like, what at 50 years old, what do I think the meaning of life is? It's to make some choices, see how they turn out, see if you learn something, and make some more choices. Isn't that fantasy football? I want to just revel in that we're here and this is real, and that we've created a sector of the media and the economy where we can sit around and be know-it-alls and be wrong most of the time, and still call this our job. It's that Yinzer magic.
That's right,
JJ.
That's right. And speaking of Yinzer magic, there's some good stuff going on in Pittsburgh right now. Some better football being played. I still am prepared. I think every person from Pittsburgh who may have some sort of attachment to the Steelers is prepared for a first round playoff exit still. But it's nice to see a little bit more of some positivity coming out of Acrisure.
And it's Heinz Field. And they have an us against the world mentality. Right. I want to say hats off to Aaron Rodgers with this cast off idea.
Yeah.
And teams, I think Jacksonville has this right now. I think Chicago has this right now. I think teams that feel like everybody was against us. Everybody doubted us. No one thought we could do this. That's very powerful at this time of year. Yeah. So this is fun. And I think that there's a lesson that Aaron Rodgers is teaching all of us that I know we're going to get to. Yes, we all have things to learn from Aaron Rodgers.
From everyone. From anyone.
Yes. You know? Yes, true.
You know?
Yeah.
It does kind of have like the one Steeler team that, because this was when I was like peak fandom. I'm sure you're like me where it's like, yeah, that's my team that I root for if I root for a team, but doing this as your job makes you just really appreciate other franchises and other builds and other players and coaches and how they handle things. You know, like I sit here and I marvel at what Lamar Jackson does, and my teenage self, looking at the Ravens in that way would hate my, late 30s self, but it's just, it's just the way that it goes with our jobs. I think fandom can be a beautiful thing. I also, we've both seen the dark side of fandom, on both social media and in just the real world. Sure. But I think fandom can be great. And it's fun to always connect with people, over that. But you mentioned like what Aaron Rodgers has been talking about, and like the idea that you have all these players that are coming together that other teams didn't want and such. Kind of a vibe, if I go back and I think back to old Steeler teams, kind of that 05-06 vibe of that team, right? Yeah. Where they were 7-5, and then you get that Jerome Bettis, Brian Urlacher snow game, and he runs them over, and that was like the turning point of the season. And maybe the rushing touchdown with Aaron Rodgers against Baltimore was a turning point of the season for them. Maybe, yeah, right. The belt and Mike Tomlin doing it with him on the sideline. We'll see. But like I said, always great to chop it up with you. You were the first ever guest in Late Round Perspectives back in the day. And now I think this is like 76 episodes in or so. So it's great to have you back. And honestly, I this is the last Perspectives episode of the fantasy season, right? Of this regular season, because the holidays and stuff next week. And I really wanted to do sort of a high level recappy. We don't have to get super, super detailed about, this specific thing that we learned, but more of the vibes of the season, and more thinking about how, folks and managers might be thinking about stuff entering 2026 and so on. But the first thing that I really wanted to get to, is that you're sort of a voice of reason within the space at this point. You're wise, and you're always, giving very, very quality advice. You've given me plenty of advice through the years, now that we've been friends now for well over a decade. And so I want to ask you, because I think a lot of people, and I'm dealing with this right now too, right? Like I famously, a couple weeks ago, that Broncos Commanders game, when it went into overtime, I needed no RJ Harvey. And of course, RJ Harvey scores like 9 PPR points on that final drive because he scored the touchdown. And I missed out on the playoffs in this league by 8 PPR points. And it was essentially because, and so I looked at my wife, who was still awake, and I looked at her and I go, I need to just throw something. And I went to my kitchen and I grabbed my giant water jug and I went outside into my patio and I just tossed it, and it broke everywhere. Right. And I immediately went inside and I just bought another one. But we all go through these tilting experiences with fantasy. And of course that team is dominant and is crushing and would have probably won, the fantasy title, or you and I would be playing each other in the Apex League this week had Jalen Waddle and Chris Boswell scored 9 PPR points on Monday night.
Yeah.
Instead, they scored 8.6, and now I am not facing you, and you are now facing our buddy Matt Harmon. So I say all that, and I preface all that because I tilt, everyone tilts, we all go through these experiences. What is your mindset when you have those bad beats, and what could you sort of bestow on others on how they should handle those bad beats?
Yeah, this is where Aaron Rodgers is going to hold class, or Joe Flacco, if you prefer. Yeah. Right? Because that was the old man game, and now we have Phillip Rivers.
Yeah.
The old, and the funny thing is, they're all younger than me. When you saw Joe Flacco after he was traded to the Bengals, a reporter asked him, like, why are you still playing? And he said something to the effect of, I know there's going to come a time that I can't play, and I want to know that I played as much as I could. I left it all on the field, as they say. Mm-hmm. And with Aaron Rodgers, I think you can see it, JJ. Like, why has Aaron Rodgers turned into grumpy old man Aaron Rodgers, who actually is kind of likable because it's authentic,
right?
Like he doesn't have this relationship with the media now where he's like, I know that you want me to say this or do this, and I'm going to keep my distance. He's just being himself. But I think Aaron Rodgers came back this year because he wanted to just be a football player.
Yeah.
With a football team on the very unique journey that only NFL teams take. Even other sports teams can't truly identify with it's like being part of a battalion at war. Mm-hmm. So you lose some of your soldiers along the way, and so on and so forth. And you either, eventually most teams lose that final battle, right? Most teams don't make it, but it's the amazing journey. Mm-hmm. And fantasy football was created as a microcosm of football to give us the chance to feel like it's our journey.
Yeah.
And even if you win or lose, really enjoy the journey. Think back to that week that you thought that, I don't know, Woody Marks was going to be your savior, whatever. You think about all the ups and downs that we go through, and it provides a way of marking time, shared experiences. Mm-hmm. It's always stimulating. Fantasy football keeps you in this suspended state of always looking back and trying to learn and apply it to the future simultaneously. It gives us something that is a nice diversion from real problems. And I guess that's the other thing, is I tell people, if you're tilting because of your fantasy football team, then be happy that you're not tilting because, like, your mother's in the hospital, and she only has a certain amount of time or something like that.
Yeah.
I know I know for some people their mother might be in the hospital,
right? But
really, it is like you and I sitting here and talking about this, because I think fantasy football it's all overthinkers, overanalyzers. We think we know better. We love to talk about things. We love to think about things, and through this, we found each other, and that's actually what's going on. Mm-hmm. Whether our teams win or lose is the handshake. It's the rabbit that we're Alice, and winning is the rabbit, but it's the Mad Hatter and all the other. I'm the Mad Hatter. It's all of us that you encounter. That's really what this is about.
Yeah, I love that answer. I do think that one thing that I try to keep in mind, because like that Apex game that I had against Harmon, I was texting him throughout, actually, whenever that Monday night game was going down. And I was like, yeah, I'm taking the L here, kind of reverse psychology type stuff, and
reverse Bloom. Yeah.
Reverse jinxing it a little bit, and just saying, like, no way, Jalen, after the first half was over, I was like, there's no way Chris Boswell and Jalen Waddle are going to score 6 PPR points in the second half here. And then Harmon's like, oh, they got it easily, all that kind of stuff. And then I think back, and it was really frustrating whenever it ended and I lost, and I lost by 0.4. That's not fun. I had Woody Marks on my team too, and he obviously got hurt. He would have easily gotten that 0.4, 4 more yards had he been healthy. But it's also one of those things where I enjoy the storytelling of what fantasy football brings us. And in 3 years, it's going to be really fun reminiscing and be, hey, remember the one time whenever this happened and I was able to, wasn't able to overcome this game against you. And then, my one thing though is that I hope you just destroy Harmon this week. I hope that your team just blows up so that I wouldn't have even made advancement in the playoffs anyway. You always hope for that kind of thing to happen, but
That's one of the funny things, like an on the couch, my double entendre on the couch on my show. Because my wife, who you all just saw in the background, she is doing an office league with a dentist office that she works with for the first time. She lost last week because she played Dak Prescott over Jalen Hurts, right? And she had a chance to win if Devin A. Chan was held under like 15 points.
Yeah.
And it didn't happen. But she learned that it's better to get smoked by like 50 points than to rethink every decision you made and how it's your fault that you lost.
Yes.
But, we're all being too hard on ourselves.
Yeah.
So it is fascinating, though. And then, like you say, you can still watch the next week, see what happens.
Yeah.
And then I'm always reminded of the parable of the Chinese farmer. I was talking to my buddy Justin Scott Royer, and he was talking about how, like, it's, never make those last second decisions. I think he said he talked himself out of Darren Waller at the last second. Oh gosh. In a big money contest.
Yeah.
And I said, but maybe it's like the Chinese farmer. The old story, like, oh, my son broke his leg. That's bad. Oh, they came for the military draft. You didn't have to go. That's good. The wild horses and all that.
Yeah.
Maybe because you will always remember that mistake next year.
True.
You'll be at a fork in the road and you'll make the right decision.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. And, if you think about it, there are only the truly horrific beats, whether good or bad, are the ones that you remember 10 years later,
JJ, some people lost knowing that there was a stat correction. What was it this week? Week 5 or week 6?
Yeah, I think, yeah. I saw that. There was like
Caleb Williams.
Yeah, like a week 5 change. Yeah.
There are teams, I saw someone post it, that like if that stat correction was done, they would have made the fantasy football playoffs. And chances are, I guarantee you, those teams would have had a team that would have run the table.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's the thing that hurts the most for me, is that like, that same league that I've just been cursed the last 2 years in this league, the way that I view it, right? The negative side to this is like, oh, I'm cursed. I'm just so unlucky. And then meanwhile, the best ball season's going great and all that. And I'm, you try to latch onto that, but you're human. Negativity bias definitely seeps in all the time. And, last year in this exact same league, I didn't get a bye, even though I had the second best record in the league, because there were divisions. It's a local league. There were divisions. And then obviously I lose round 1, and then my team dominates rounds 2 and 3. Right. And so I would have won had there just not been divisions in this league. I would have won the championship. And then this year, team's going off. It's great. It's got Travion Henderson, all that. And yeah, I mean, it's painful that you could sit and bask in that glory of having a back-to-back championship. And then you start to get existential with it. You're like, well, what does that even matter at the end of the day? We're just on a floating rock anyway. What does a championship matter out of a 14-team league anyway?
Well, and here's the thing, JJ, and here is why, as it is in the NFL, so it is in fantasy football. This is what the teams have to go through. This is exactly
on a greater scale too. I mean, like on a
I promise
greater
you,
scale.
I promise you, like when a team is eliminated, like when Joe Burrow was eliminated from the playoffs last week, he was thinking about those passes he threw against Buffalo, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. But you try to find a way to be resilient, get it together, and next we're going to learn and we're going to be better next year. I lost the Apex Championship last year because I talked myself into putting Marvin Mims in, and then I talked myself out of it, and he would have won it.
And then he went, yeah. It's tough. It's tough, but I think that it's good to talk about it because. Number one, when I talk about it, people are always like, "Oh, it's so great that someone that is, has an audience like this, and you're speaking about fantasy. You tilt too." Yeah, guys. I mean, to be fair, I get more upset with myself when I just give bad advice because that's my livelihood, right? Like, my teams are secondary to me; like they're not nearly as important. But obviously, my teams are going to go hand in hand with my advice because I'm going to draft off of the way that I feel about these guys and pick guys up and such. But it's the advice side that's more important. So let's get into some of that advice stuff and in the analysis side. When you look back on this season, what's been the biggest surprise for you this year?
It's Jacoby Brissett, and it's an important one. It's an important one for us to remember because the idea is never say never. Never say never in fantasy football. Mm-hmm. And as I've been beating the drum for a few years now, JJ, I mean, I have settled on this. The most important skill, quote unquote skill in fantasy football is perseverance. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's more important than knowing ball.
Yeah.
Folks. That's more important than knowing to listen to someone smart like JJ. And then the next most important thing is being willing to accept a new reality before there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that it's true.
Yep.
And that includes being open to seemingly absurd things. Because Jacoby Brissett, as somebody who would turn a pass offense into one of the most productive pass offenses in the league, was absurd.
Yeah.
However, if you've been watching Kyler Murray's career, even watching Joshua Dobbs as the quarterback for the Cardinals maybe gave you an inkling that Kyler Murray is not actually running an NFL pass offense. Mm-hmm. He's not actually running the plays true to their conception and design. And Jacoby Brissett, even though he came into the league, what did he throw? Like 19 passes in his first game for the Patriots when Brady was suspended. He came into the league as a game manager. And even until this year, his reputation was a game manager. But he's a veteran quarterback. Let's look at like Mac Jones. Now, Mac Jones is a Kyle Shanahan kind of quarterback, but these veteran quarterbacks who can actually take the plays from the whiteboard to the field can unlock a lot whenever the starting quarterback, it's not just how much will a player improve an offense, it's how much was the previous quarterback leaving things on rotting on the vine.
Yeah.
So, that was the most consequential development in that it turned Trey McBride into league winner. It turned Michael Wilson into potential league winner. We'll see about Marvin Harrison. And it rewarded people that said by week 2 or week 3, I trust Jacoby Brissett.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because now it's 9 straight weeks, including against the Texans, because there was enough garbage time, and the Cardinals defense is adding. Now, what's going to be funny is this week against Atlanta, it is set up for a shootout. Mm-hmm. Is this the rug pull? Is this where the fantasy football?
I know. I keep thinking that too. I mean, it couldn't really be set up better for that offense the next 2 weeks, right? Where they get Cincinnati next week, and obviously they funnel their looks through the tight end, and Cincinnati can't stop tight ends. And then this week you get Atlanta, who's been reeling the second half of the season defensively. Like both defenses really have just been Arizona and Atlanta have been a lot worse defensively. And this is one of those things where I keep thinking about this with Trey McBride, where I'm like, we're all like, yeah, he's going to score 30 fantasy points in week 17, and then watch him score 5. Watch him have his worst outing. But I think all logic, and again, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the top, but like, if you had a sound process to get to that decision, if you were logical and you didn't do something really stupid, you can't really be that mad about yourself. Like, I benched Adonai Mitchell last week for Jalen Waddle. And I actually did it for Stephon Diggs too. And that killed me, right? Like in that Apex League. And that's the reason why you could say I lost. I also started Theo Johnson over Dallas Goedert last week, but I had AJ Brown in my lineup, and I'm not going to start 2 Philadelphia Eagles pass catchers when now in hindsight, they threw the ball 18 times in that game. Like that
15, 12 out of 15.
Yeah, exactly. And so like, I don't think that any of that from a process perspective, given my lineup, was bad or wrong. Stephon Diggs crushed Buffalo the last time they played them, and for whatever reason, they're just not giving him a high route share right now, And go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, that like I love Cecil says, you have a life we don't. That applies to all of us fantasy football analysts, right? Mm-hmm. And that you've gotten to peak fantasy football analyst, JJ, when you get to this like God level knowledge, and I'm saying that mockingly, right, where no matter what happens, JJ, you say, I should have known. Right. I should have known. Right. Kenneth Walker's going to go off against the Rams. It was the last 100 total yard game he had back in week 10. I should have known.
Right.
Kenneth Walker only got 30 total yards, and the Seahawks only scored 3 points.
Yeah.
I should have known.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
No matter what happens, enough supporting information that your brain will always say, I should have known.
Yeah. And it's similar. I got a mailbag question about Jacoby Brissett this week, and they were like, how could I possibly play Jacoby Brissett over Lamar Jackson and Justin Herbert? And I'm like, well, look, both of those guys could outscore Jacoby Brissett this week. But I do think that process-wise, and given what we've seen and what we know about that environment, I have him ranked higher than those two this week.
Yeah, I do too. I do too.
Yeah.
And I think that it's one of those questions too. Bob Harris says, divorce the names from the numbers.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is if you just look at Lamar Jackson's game log, I mean, he's not a strong start.
Right.
The Ravens like to shorten the game. If you look at Justin Herbert the last few weeks, and knowing that Quinnen Williams is in concussion protocol.
Right.
So, hey, if the Chargers with their defense, they're a defense-led team right now.
Right.
If they can hand the ball off to Vidal and Hampton like 35 times, they'll be perfectly content to do that this week.
Yep.
Jacoby Brissett is the one that the offense is running through that guy.
Yeah, exactly. But I like the call out of Jacoby Brissett as the biggest surprise, because I think that's also like just an example of a greater picture and a bigger picture of quarterback play right now in the league of, I don't know what the real, maybe you have some insight on this, but I don't have a real answer as to why I don't know if there's a development problem. I thought Kirk Cousins had I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, I saw that. I did.
A good answer of like how progressions have changed essentially from when he first entered the league and what it's like now, and that you have to get through, you're not necessarily, you're getting through your progressions more, like you're focused more on that at this point than you were back then, where you were more so reading defenses and you were able to essentially just attack certain pockets of defenses based on what you were seeing, which is a lot easier because you're only looking at part of the field and you're only going through a couple of progressions. Whereas now, because of the way defenses are playing, you have to go through very quickly 5 players very fast. And that's where I think we see a player like a JJ McCarthy, who's very young, maybe not being able to get through that as quickly. And then why potentially this could be why we see these veteran players who have had more, or even Tyler Shuck, who's a 25, 26-year-old rookie, being able to come in and not be as bad of a pick or as bad of a player as many people, originally thought. And it's just a really interesting dynamic right now. And do you think that we're about to see, especially with Tua being benched, do you think we're about, and given the contract that they gave him, do you think we're about to see a shift in finally teams only giving the elite, obviously elite quarterbacks these big contracts? Or are we still going to be in this, like, these guys who are kind of in purgatory that we don't know if they're good or not, still getting these monster deals and kind of ruining, the future of those teams if they do tailspin and have bad seasons?
I think that supply and demand, like basic economics, dictates that we're going to stay in this situation.
Yeah.
And it's not so bad. I did think we were on our way out, because about 10 years ago, Colin Kaepernick and Andy Dalton were both notoriously like had their critics that would say they're a purgatory quarterback,
right,
even though both of those teams were doing very well at that time. And they were basically signed to team option contracts.
Yeah.
Basically, the contracts were structured so that every year the team could decide, are you worth $16 million this year? That's how much quarterbacks have grown in salary, by the way. And now, it seems to me that because there's not even 20 adequate starting quarterbacks, that when an adequate starting quarterback comes up for a new contract, he gets a top of the market contract. Some of it is also, by the way, the salary cap growth and acceleration.
Yeah.
So, agents know that, of course, you can commit this money in the future because the cap's going to grow,
right,
7% year over year or something like that. And the team that doesn't have an adequate starting quarterback will pay. And I wonder if that would be the shift, because here's where it takes courage. It takes courage to say, instead of paying Brock Purdy or Tua or whoever $50 million at a time when the team seems to be trending in the right direction, because that's the whole thing, right? It's an endorsement. It's
right,
the franchise saying, like, we like the way things are going. We're going to keep going in that direction. Trade the quarterback.
Yeah.
Trade him to a team and then start over. And that's exactly what Kevin O'Connell basically did. He didn't trade Sam Darnold, but he didn't sign him.
Right.
And I think we're actually seeing, as the year goes on, JJ, fascinatingly enough, that Sam Darnold's flaws are very apparent. And Kevin O'Connell not marrying Sam Darnold, at least that part of the decision looks wise. That's the part where, like, why pay these guys?
Yeah.
But JJ McCarthy, the other part is being patient about quarterback development. And maybe it just is with these defenses, it's going to be very difficult. Drake May's a savant, but otherwise it's very difficult for these quarterbacks. First, they need reps.
Yeah.
That's why Tyler Shuck, it's reps.
Yeah.
But to your other point, where I think this affects fantasy football, that's really interesting, JJ, is I think everybody's waking up to how much variance there is week to week in the NFL.
Sure.
I mean, in some ways, it's what keeps us coming back, and in other ways, it's what makes fantasy football just seem senseless. I mean, what a ridiculous exercise we do. But I think what you laid out is very important, because it shows you, number one, why, I think CJ Stroud this weekend's a good example, why some quarterbacks, Bo Nix, and their offenses can really beat up on bad defenses.
Yeah.
But then when they face like a middling defense, it shrinks by 50%, because everything works against the bad defenses. And then the other part is if we're talking about going to more pure progressions over reading a defense, offensive line play matters. Kirk Cousins said, like, geez, if you're going to get to 3, 4, 5 in the progressions, next thing you know, the backside rusher's on you. So offensive line play becomes more important. Why did Justin Herbert collapse?
I was going to say, or that's got to be the example this year I think a lot of people will attribute like the injury that he's dealing. It's not that. It's literally I mean, look at their splits with and without Joe Alt, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's the line. It's the offensive line for the Chargers.
So every week we learn, and next year we're going to get some of this stuff right, and then we're going to get some of this stuff wrong. Yeah. But I think that much like the NFL, I'll sum this topic up in this way, because I love all sports. Like, I'm getting amped about the World Cup. I love all sports. I love all of these competitions. But why the NFL? Like, why focus just on the NFL other than our Yinzer roots? Because football is a religion in Pittsburgh. And Chuck Klosterman wrote a really good piece back on ESPN's page 2. ESPN had a blog. It was actually pretty cool. Hunter Thompson wrote for it. And it was an excerpt from his book, I think, called Walking the Dinosaur. And he talked about how the A11 offense, remember the A11 offense? Mm-hmm. And basically how, like, football has rules, and then you can do anything that's allowed within the rules. Yeah. Anything. Yeah. If the rules don't say you can't do it, you can do it. And because of that, it's very progressive. And this is where we get to a copycat league, right? Right. Now it's the tush push, whatever. If it works, it's like DNA. It's like Darwinism, right? If it works, it proliferates until it doesn't work, and then it doesn't proliferate. So we can never step in the same river twice. Yeah. It's always different. It's always changing. It's frustrating, but it keeps it so vital and stimulating.
I think that you also see that. I mean, look, you've been doing this longer than I have. And I've been, doing this now full time for 13, 14 years. But even in that time frame, I've seen the ebbs and flows of the actual game changing fantasy football and how those evolutions occur and happen. And I think we're seeing it now, even today, where one of the things, and let's move on to this next topic, because I think it plays into this. The season's about to end. There's only 2 weeks left. I mean, by this point, we generally know what our teams look like going into the semifinals. And then next week, there's going to be injuries, but that's basically who we're adding and dropping. Like, we know who the players are at this point. That's why I don't want to focus too much on that. What I do want to focus on is when we look back on this season, what do you think is going to be one of the biggest stories? And I have something that I want to add, but I want to hear what you say first, because it does what I have to say does play into what we were talking about a little bit.
This has been a very unique fantasy football season.
Agreed.
There has not been another season like this. And it maps to a very unique NFL season. Let me touch on the NFL season stuff first. With the exception of maybe, I don't know, Carolina, every team that makes the postseason tournament can win the Super Bowl. Yeah. And we can't usually say that. Yeah. It's why playoff fantasy football is going to be awesome this year.
It is.
If you haven't done playoff fantasy football, you can do it with 5 of your friends. You can score it by hand. You can do an actual draft in person or an email draft, or do it over your text messages. You don't need any league software or anything. But it makes you have to take a stand on how far teams are going to make it in the playoffs, which is, there's going to be a wide set of opinions. Yeah. Now, in fantasy football, what's interesting, JJ, is here's something you have not heard this year. Oh, well, all my Justin Jefferson teams, it doesn't matter if he goes off because I didn't make the playoffs because of him. Yeah. Or Ashton Genty or Ladd McConkey or whoever, right? Everybody has stepped on landmines. Yep. Everybody, even the good players, like Jamar Chase had a stretch with Jake Browning. Yep. Right? If you avoided Trey McBride because of Kyler Murray, you were right. Right. And yet he's going to be a league winner. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So it was, again, about perseverance. And where it culminates is here we are in week 16, JJ. And if you're playing, you have some real decisions to make. Mm-hmm. Unlike most seasons, it's like, okay, well, hey, 7 or 8 of your starters are like, those are the guys that got you there. Yep. Right. Yep. This season, I mean, at running back 2 or flex, at quarterback, at tight end, if you don't have like one of the top 2 or 3, at wide receiver, I feel like, what are there, like 15 guys?
Dude, that was actually what I was going to say. Since you just brought it up, I'll just chime in. But that was the thing that I was going to say as like a big story this year. You and I mean, when you rank players every week and I look at wide receiver, I say to myself, there's 8 good players. And then there's just the rest, right?
Right.
And yeah, there's like groupings of what the rest is, but the wide receiver ones go to like, I don't know, Nico Collins-ish, right? Into that area.
Right.
And then there's a giant chunk of wide receiver 2s. And then there's an even bigger chunk of wide receiver 3s. And the data bears this out too. The data says that wide receiver 1s this year, if you just look at the wide receiver 6 in terms of points per game and compare that to history, the wide receiver 6 this year is outperforming history, right? And outperforming what we've seen over the last decade plus. But then you get into the wide receiver 18, 24, 30, 36, historically bad, like historically bad. And I think that if you are, like if you are playing fantasy football still, you've experienced that where I have a bunch of Stephon Diggs this year, right? He's been unbelievably frustrating to have because they just aren't giving him the route share that he needs to be able to thrive and do a lot from a production standpoint. Obviously what they're doing is fine, you could argue, because they're winning. But, selfishly, if you have him, you're like, man, why won't they just use him more? Because we've seen the kind of production he can post when they are using him more. And so, but then you take a step back and you're like, well, Zay Flowers is like this too, or has been like this too. Or Cortland Sutton has been like this. Troy Franklin you see these ebbs and flows. Like Troy Franklin was their wide receiver 1 for 4 weeks of the season. And then all of a sudden, Pat Bryant jumps him. And now Troy Franklin's an afterthought. I know he was fine last week, but he was still running fewer routes than Lil Jordan Humphrey last week, And so to me, this season, and you mentioned that it's been like unlike any other, I definitely feel that way as an analyst because I've almost seen it like we've had these like mini seasons within the season.
Exactly.
Right.
That's it. Cecil calls it windows.
Yeah.
Matt Waldman has been counseling us for years that the NFL consumes the season in these 4-week chunks. And everybody. So if I could give advice to folks from a fantasy football perspective here is we're all used to, we gear up all off season. We draft our teams, and then for the next week, 2, 3 into the beginning of the season, we adjust to the new reality, right?
Yeah.
But that task doesn't end in September.
Right.
That's the entire season.
Right.
The entire season, you should be open to things being different than they were last week and last month. And honestly, looking backward past a month, I don't know what it's useful for at this point, unless you're getting players back and you're looking at like, well, when the last time they had this player, what did the offense look like? But as far as trends, I feel like you're looking at the last 3 or 4 weeks. And I'll give you another good example here. Teams with new head coaches like Jacksonville, Chicago. We heard this all preseason and offseason. It's going to be rough at first.
Yes.
Jacksonville's blocking schemes are more complex than the offensive line have had to digest. Chicago is getting used to a coaching staff that is requiring precision from them. And what are we seeing? Who are 2 of the hottest offenses?
Right. Yeah.
So understanding the context of these things is so important, and not being surprised. We should be more surprised if Jacksonville and Chicago were getting worse over the course of the year.
Yeah. No, it's a really good point. And then you can look at the individual level too. I mean, there's players like in September, everyone was like, yeah, Rome Odunze and Emeka Egbuka, league winner. Yeah. Like you're just going to use them. But now, the
Michael Wilson.
This is actually Okay. This is something that I'm going to be fired up about because right before we hopped on, I had been talking in the late round Discord with a bunch of subscribers about Travion Henderson's season. Okay. And this is, we don't have to dig into Henderson in particular just yet, but I do want to talk about this concept and idea. But Travion Henderson and Emeka Egbuka have done the complete opposite in terms of how they've produced this year. Right. And I would argue pretty strongly that you actually, that Emeka Egbuka, despite what he did to start the year, and despite me, I mean, I was super high on him as a prospect and, as a player, and I still am. I think he's got a very good career ahead of him, right? But right now, things are very shaky because of what's going on in Tampa Bay. But I would argue that Emeka Egbuka has, even if, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but let's just say Egbuka has been better versus ADP or within his position than Henderson has. I would argue that he's been a worse fantasy asset for your individual team because he starts so hot. And this is what you're saying, like kind of anchoring to what happened earlier in the season. He starts so hot, and then you start to make excuses for when he's not so hot, right? And yes, there should be some regression eventually hitting, right? Realistically, he's not going to have a 50% catchable target rate, forever. That's just not it's just not what happens. But it's only a 8-game sample. Like anything can happen within like that small of a sample. And now you got Mike Evans back and Jeremy McMillan back. And the problem is you feel bad benching Emeka Ibuka. And so you're using him and you're just starting him and you're getting 9 PPR points. And you're like eventually, and you could make the argument that it's similar with Justin Jefferson right now, where the matchups are great. And you're like, I can't, and look, I have Jefferson in the semifinal this week. I'm not going to bench him because I don't feel, I just, if he goes off and you bench one of the best wide receivers in the game, you got to live with that, and that's fine. If the psychological component of this game and you having to just like live with those decisions, that's fine. But with a guy like TreVeyon Henderson, he starts off so slow, even though he was so hyped, he starts off so slow. And then eventually you hit a wall and you're like, I'm not playing TreVeyon Henderson. Why would I play TreVeyon? Week 3, especially after that like Miami game and stuff, when things were just a disaster, you're like, wow, I can't just throw him out on the field because this is not an easy decision. He's clearly not there yet, right? But then he had it was nice from his perspective and from a fantasy manager's perspective, because there was a point in time that was very clear that he was going to get more work, which was the Ramondre Stevenson injury. And then since then, it's been rocket ship emojis. And since then, you've been able to enjoy, a fringe RB1, if not an RB1 in fantasy football. And so my question to you is, do you think that's the way that people should be looking at this, that it is this weekly game? But then let's specifically talk about TreVeyon Henderson. My question would be, do you think Henderson right now, we have 2 more weeks to go. So let's just assume that he's going down this, he's not going to score 30 PPR points every week. Let's just say that he averages like 16 the next 2 games, right? Do you think we're going to look back and say he was a good pick, a bad pick, or just a neutral pick?
I think he was a bad pick.
Okay, I want to talk about this because I think this is a really, really good and interesting discussion to have. So let's hear that.
I think he was a bad pick because he was a 4th round pick, right?
Yeah, 4th rounder.
Around a 4th rounder. And you did get the stretch when Stevenson was out. And hopefully you went with him last week against Buffalo. Mm-hmm. But the problem is he still was only in about 50% of the snaps last week. And Baltimore's defense looked like they were rabid against their. Here's what makes me a little bit worried about Henderson and really about New England in general this week.
Yeah.
I mean, if somebody came to me and said, am I crazy to put Drake May on the bench for Jacoby Brissett or Jared Goff or Trevor Lawrence? I'd say that's not crazy.
Yeah.
It's not crazy because now if Jacksonville beats Denver earlier in the day, some doors open for the Patriots to get the number 1 seed. But putting that aside, the Patriots know that they can lose to Baltimore and still win the division. Mm-hmm. But all they have to do is beat Miami and the Jets. They know that because they lost the tie. Can you believe that because they lost to the Raiders, that actually happened? Because they lost to the Raiders, we're going to lose the tiebreaker to the Broncos.
It's crazy.
So they're in trouble. The Ravens are a cornered, wounded animal right now. And I just think, I don't know how the Patriots can bring that kind of intensity, especially after the Patriots were soaring. And I didn't expect this to happen to a Mike Vrabel team, because the Mike Vrabel Titans teams were the teams that did this to other teams.
Yeah.
Where they said, you let your guard down. You thought you won, but you didn't. The game's not over.
Yeah.
So, now could there be one well-blocked run that TreVeyon Henderson gets a 70-yard run? And it's like Michael Wilson and his garbage time drive last week. I mean, it doesn't, it's fantasy football, so it's never certain. But I think you're right. And we could talk about this for hours. We could do a whole podcast series on like psychology. Again, that's one of my shows on the couch, because already my wife is like, I'm not taking any Cowboys, because she played Dak Prescott over Jalen Hurts. She's like, I'm not taking any Cowboys next year,
Yeah.
So you can take advantage of this if you're not consumed by it. But at the same time, I encourage everybody to play fantasy football very emotionally.
Yeah.
Because like your life, when you get skewed by emotion, that hurts.
Yeah.
So get it all out in fantasy.
It's a good point. So here's my argument with TreVeyon. And I want to preface by saying that, like, yes, I really like TreVeyon as a prospect, and I liked him as a 4th round pick this year. I think I was looking earlier whenever I was discussing things with patrons in the Discord. I had him like 40th overall or something like that in draft, or no, 34th overall, I think. So a late 3rd round, value on him in redraft. And then I went on the Fantasy Footballer show, the biggest fantasy podcast in the world. And I said, hey, my MVP this year is going to be TreVeyon Henderson. So I want to preface with all of that if people think that there's a bias here, because I'm not trying to approach this with bias, but I want to be transparent. My thing with Henderson is that because like the anti-argument for Henderson for folks today on Discord was that, oh, he didn't give you anything until like week 10 or whatever, whenever things like really started to ramp up for him, which is totally factually true. My argument against that would be, hopefully you're not just starting him no matter what, like that's
right.
That's
right.
where I think, I do all of this stuff in spreadsheets and, I'm looking at ADP expectation and how players performed against expectation. And that's generally going to get you in the right direction, but that's not everything. You got to think about how the ebbs and flows are working and what you're doing weekly in managing these teams. And, I can go back and look at my weekly rankings and see that Travion was not a top 30 running back as early as week 3, so yes, you drafted him early, but you weren't necessarily starting him as early as week 3, week 4, week 5. And so if you weren't getting that production, yes, it sucks if you draft him in round 3, round 4, and you weren't getting anything. But I also think back, Bloom, to what drafts were like this summer. And do you remember there just being such an obvious fall after that, like 2-3 turn, after like the Trey McBride, JSN, T. Higgins kind of area? And after that, you were like, well, I don't really want to get Marvin Harrison.
Anybody.
Yeah, right. And so I think that that's also driving up and like shifting the narrative maybe a little bit with a guy like Henderson was that yes, he got steamed, he got hyped, and the preseason certainly didn't help with that. And it annoys me sometimes that I get placed in this bucket of like, oh, you just fell for the hype. I'm like, no, I really liked him as a prospect. Like I just liked him as a player. It wasn't because I saw what he did on a kick return, and that's why I boosted him up. But when I go back and look, I think the only guy that you like, it was Kyron and James Cook in that area that hopefully you were able to get them ahead of Travion. I had Travion, I think, ahead of James Cook, which was a mistake, but there was landmine after landmine. I mean,
Alvin Kamara,
right? Alvin Kamara, Breece Hall.
Oh gosh, yeah.
There's just a lot of, and then the wide receivers too. Marvin Harrison Jr., DK Metcalf. Like there were players in there that you didn't feel that great about, and that's why I think looking back, because right now I plugged it in yesterday. Travion Henderson. So I look at ADP expectations. So I just plug in their ADP, and then I look at history, and I have these curves that tell me essentially what was expected by that player in points per game at that particular ADP. Because a lot of people look at, Henderson, like I even tweeted about a poll before we started the show that said, was Travion Henderson a good pick, a bad pick, or a neutral pick, right? And the response from people was like, well, he's the RB18 and he was drafted at RB17, so therefore he's more of a neutral, But that's not how this works. Like if you drafted an RB5 and he's the RB8, that's a great pick, right? Because expectation-wise, there's a wide range. There's not that much further north that those guys can necessarily go. And so that's why I look at raw points per game, because it allows you to have like a real value of where that player is versus expectation. Right now, Travion Henderson is minus 0.6 points per game below expectation, or 6 points per game below 0.6 points per game below expectation. And so my argument would be, and I want to just hear what you have to say about this, because I care deeply about how you feel about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like my argument would be he's playing barely below expectation on a points per game basis right now, but his production is coming at such an important time of the fantasy season that yes, realistically, there's no difference between week 10 and week 1 from a real football player's perspective. Like it's just the fact that like, yeah, it's more important that in week 15 in the playoffs, he had a monster week and teams with Travion Henderson likely moved on because he had you could look at best ball advance rate. He has a great advance rate right now because he had this monster game. And the argument against that is, well, those teams didn't make the playoffs because he spent a 3rd or 4th round pick. But I think this year, the players around him, the opportunity cost wasn't that significant.
Doesn't matter.
And then on top of that, guys, 50% of your league generally will make the playoffs. There's a 50-50 proposition that you would, all things being equal, that you're going to make the playoffs. To assume that one player in the 3rd or 4th round is the sole reason that that you're on the wrong side of that 50-50, there's other things going on with your team that allowed that to happen. So that's why I would say right now I'm more neutral, right? That's how I would answer that poll. But if I think it'll depend on the next 2 weeks. Like if he, like you said, I'm worried. Like I'm starting Jacoby Brissett over Drake May in a playoff matchup this week because I too am a little bit concerned about what that Baltimore defense could just flip the switch and just do what they did. Last week they looked really good. But yeah, like what if this New England offense just isn't able to move the ball as well? But if he does score 15 to 20 PPR points in the next 2 weeks, I think I might say, even though he was so bad to start the year, because you're managing it weekly, we might say he was an okay pick. He's not a league winner. He's not great, nothing like that. But I think he was at least an okay pick.
Well, and to your point, I think an interesting version of the question you asked, and it's so great that you have your community to
nerd out,
find out and find out like what's really going on the street.
Right.
It's like, this question is only for people that took Travion Henderson this year. Are you more or less likely to take him next year?
Yeah,
Let's say next year he's a 3rd round pick.
Yeah.
And I would guess a lot of people say, yeah, I want Travion Henderson, because when I'm reflecting on all this, JJ, the reason people were in on Travion Henderson was that every report said the Patriots are so excited about him. And they said they were working on getting him involved as a receiver. Mm-hmm. I had him projected for like Austin Eckler's second season.
Right.
Like 70, 80 catches with some explosive plays, maybe only 100 carries.
Yeah.
And that never materialized.
Yeah.
So arguably we haven't even seen what Travion Henderson was supposed to be, why he was going in the 4th round.
Yeah.
And if we do see that next year, wheels up.
Yeah. Rocket ship. Yeah. It's going to be insane. But also, a big discussion point with all of this is just rookies in general.
Yeah.
This rookie class has been so interesting to me. It's been so bizarre in some ways, because all of my research says that, and it's logical too. I always like to match what data is saying with what the natural human brain would say about something, right? Like just what's rational. And rookies perform way better the second half of the season than the first, generally speaking, like overall trend wise, which of course it makes sense. They're getting more reps. They're getting used to the game. They're getting more, they're getting used more, on a football field. And so, but the thing is that can you think of any rookie right now that, like, every year we have at least like 2 or 3 that seem to be surging at the end of the season. Yeah. And is Travion the only one that's really truly, I mean, maybe RJ Harvey, maybe like,
Harold Fannin.
Yeah, right. Oh, Harold, yeah, that's true.
Holston Loveland.
Yeah. But again, like Loveland and Burden, for instance, because Burden's playing really well too. But both of them are more of the we're getting excited for 2026 type of players, right?
Yeah.
Because the route shares are not like extreme, or they're not and so the production's not necessarily there yet. Hopefully it will be, because it's been great watching them. But do you think that this is going to like shift the way that people look at rookies in the future? Do you think this is a blip? Do you think this is a weird year, for rookies? Like, how are you just viewing this class in general?
The weird year part of it, JJ, is that it was actually a very impactful season for rookies.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, you should look back at this season and say, I should be more willing to take chances on rookies in my fantasy.
I love this answer.
Right?
Yeah, keep talking.
Because first of all, the point you were making earlier, Emeka Egbuka was an 8th, 9th round pick who we could start comfortably and help us win for like 5 or 6 weeks out of the season. That's a win.
Right.
Tyler Warren was tight end 11, 12, whatever. He was tight end 5, top 5 tight end for a long stretch of the season before Daniel Jones got hurt, right?
Yeah.
The 2 biggest impact rookies were Omarion Hampton and Cam Scadaboo. And they promptly went down with ankle injuries as soon as they looked like league winners.
Yeah.
How different is the conversation if those guys don't get hurt?
Preach.
Travis Hunter was going to break out.
Yep.
And he hurt himself in practice.
Yep.
What if a healthy Travis Hunter was part of Trevor Lawrence now feeling his confidence in this offense?
By the way, the Travis Hunter talk is going to make me want to throw this jug on my porch. So
yeah.
But yeah, no, that's a great point. Like, part of the problem in the way that we create these narratives is that we're doing it based off of, especially with rookies, we're doing it based off of a handful of guys. Like, people are looking at the top 5 running backs that were drafted this year. What it would be Ashton Genty, who, yes, has been a disappointment.
Right.
I don't even think it's been a disappointment of him as a player. It's just obviously the environment is just crushing him.
Right.
Travion Henderson, RJ Harvey, Caleb Johnson was another, and Omarion Hampton, I think those are the top 5.
Yeah.
And there's a story behind all of them that as to why things went the way that it did. But collectively, they've been disappointments because of injury, because of the way coaching staffs have handled their usage, and because of the offensive environments, or because they, muffed a kickoff early in the season and they didn't see the field again after, that muffed kickoff. And Kenneth Gainwell became the RB1 for their team.
And Hampton, I want to touch on Hampton and Henderson really quickly.
Yeah.
And I don't even know, JJ, I don't know what I learned. I don't know if I learned anything.
Right.
Because if you said O'Marion Hampton, because of the kind of coach Jim Harbaugh is, because of the kind of coach that Greg Roman is, because Najee Harris, as much as we don't like how he doesn't add value to his touches, coaches love running backs like Najee Harris. And when the Chargers coaching staff sees Harris and Hampton side by side, they're going to end up favoring Harris this year.
Mm-hmm.
That was right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was right.
Yeah.
If Najee Harris doesn't get hurt, O'Marion Hampton is we're looking at him kind of like Caleb Johnson, not as severe.
Sure.
But if you go back and look at O'Marion Hampton's carries when he was sharing with Najee Harris, when he was sharing at the beginning of the season, he did not look good.
He didn't.
And then as soon as he knew he was the guy, some sort of switch flipped. Likewise with Travion Henderson.
Yeah.
Right. Are they gonna play Terrell Jennings ahead of him? Right. But as soon as he knew it was his job, a switch flipped.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to take out of that, except that keep taking chances on rookies. And
I also think when we have these discussions, we forget about guys who have been pretty great values, like Woody Marks, like
Kyle
Monungai, players who have been totally fine. And what's funny though is
Corey Krosky Merritt.
Yeah, Krosky Merritt had his moments, and hopefully pre his steam, whenever they traded Brian Robinson and stuff, you were able to draft him. But yeah, I mean, like, I think that the overall, I know the overall sentiment is that rookies we should avoid, we shouldn't, pay them any mind and forget about them. I did do a study. It was actually episode 1000 of the Late Round Podcast. And I did a study where I looked at whether or not rookies were becoming bad bets in redraft leagues, because obviously people are getting more and more and understanding more and more that rookies can be valuable in redraft. And for years, they were some of the best values that we could possibly find in our redraft leagues. And what I found is that from a trend perspective, yes, people were drafting rookies earlier and earlier. Like if you just look at the market trends, the ADP trends, and but wide receivers were still far outpacing ADP expectation. Like rookie wide receivers as a whole have been the best like age bets that you can make in a redraft league, just given where they generally go. Running back has become more of a neutral kind of, rookie running backs have become a little bit more neutral, but still more favorable. But you could look at like second year running backs are better bets and some other ages and stuff like that. But generally speaking, entering this year, we shouldn't have said to ourselves, no, they're getting steamed up too much. We should be avoiding them, right? I do think that some of the outcomes have not been that favorable, but like you said, we forget quickly about Cam Scadaboo. We forget quickly that O'Marion Hampton could have had a monster year had he not gotten hurt, and think like things ebb and, things will change throughout a season, and we'll say, oh, well, Travion Henderson's only good because Ramondre Stevenson got hurt. And it's like, okay, but there's plenty of other guys like Michael Wilson's only good because Marvin Harrison Jr. got hurt,
Right. Well, and the other question that you have to ask yourself is, I get it, because if you're drafting a rookie, you probably have high expectations for him.
Right.
And then when the rookie doesn't meet your high expectations, it feels like the rookie's a disappointment.
Yeah.
But I guarantee, JJ, if people went through this exercise and said, okay, but let's compare Travion Henderson to the running back that went before and after him in drafts.
Yeah.
Let's compare rookies to the veteran counterparts in ADP. Just as many of them were disappointed.
Exactly. And that's what I think you have to do, because you have, not to say that you're doing some sort of like hindsight BS, but you're not, because you made that decision about Travion Henderson with the other players in mind. Like that was the actual opportunity cost that you were taking on when you took Travion Henderson. And yeah, there's going to be players later that hit better than him. And you could sit there and say all day, oh, I should have taken this guy over. You can play that game all day long. Like we should have taken George Pickens over Travion Henderson, and he was generally going later. Or even, Jameson Williams, who's another player who falls into this bucket of weird season where, the front half of the year, completely useless, crushing teams because he's taking zeros. And then now he's winning fantasy championships, And so I do think that like having that weekly perspective and then trying to just place yourself back to how you were thinking when those decisions were being made can really go a long way and can really help people kind of wrap their head around like the concept of all of this. And I also think with the Travion talk, you know, I found through doing my draft guide every year where I have like players to target and avoid. And I kind of want to frame it differently this year because it's all based on cost and stuff, but whatever. I've found that the way people react to that is that they get so comfortable with floor and they get worried about the high variance stuff. An example of that, two of the players in my avoid section this year were Cortland Sutton and Zay Flowers. Okay. I think that people would look back on the season and say, oh, like they weren't that bad of picks. You know, they were whatever, but that's kind of the point too, is that like the reason I had them as avoids is because I didn't see the best ceiling in the world for them. And I think we've kind of seen that, you know, with Zay Flowers, it's a touchdown ceiling. With Cortland Sutton, it's this roller coaster that you go through every year with him, right? And but again, they get the production at the end of the year, and it's fine enough, and people can live with that because they like to feel that comfortability. But in my opinion, fantasy football is won with the big league winners, the outliers, the guys who are giving you those 30-point performances, as opposed to the very stable players who you think, or at least the players who you think are stable when they're actually not nearly as stable as you generally think.
And those players, you mentioned Flowers and Sutton. I mean, at least with Sutton, I do think the Broncos finally figured out he's their number one receiver.
Yeah, right.
And he should get 10
to be
targets.
clear, I'm not taking a W or an L with those guys. I'm just using them as examples. Yeah.
But you know, but the problem with the variance guys from week to week is it can tie your brain in knots trying to figure out, is there a pattern?
Yeah.
Is there some sort of tell or skeleton key? But you know, it's fun. In some ways, it's just a microcosm of life where I'm 50, JJ. I like saying that. I love saying I'm 50. But, you know, the closest approximation I can give people to like what at 50 years old, what do I think the meaning of life is? It's to make some choices, see how they turn out, see if you learn something and make some more choices.
Yeah.
Isn't that fantasy football?
Yeah. I like that a lot. Since we're talking about rookies, do you have any 2026 guys that?
Yes.
Yeah, I want to hear about some of your favorite 2026 rookies that could be flying under the radar.
Yes, and by the way, just to your point, since I know there was a question we were possibly going to talk about, like what were like the lessons learned.
Yes.
I think that the experience of fantasy football this year was so varied and so chaotic that there are no lessons learned. Yeah. Everyone's lessons learned are going to be different, which is great because it means everyone's going to like author their own team and go through their draft their own way instead of finding these structural, this is a good year to take this position later because everyone's overreacting to something that happened last year.
Yeah.
Everybody had their own individual journey this year. Rookies for next year, second year players. Cam Ward's really interesting.
Okay.
He's played a lot better than his stats.
Yeah, last couple of weeks. I mean, well, the stats have caught up a little bit the last couple of weeks.
A little bit, yeah. But everybody, there are some players that were traded away from the Titans, and there are other players talking, player analysts, and they're all saying, like, Cam Ward looks like he's going to be a player. Mm-hmm. At running back, I just say just put a pin in Jordan James, because we have seen that this running back class, the hype was actually real.
I agreed.
Like, they're, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, hopefully next year, Brashard Smith, that's another one. Kyle Monangai, like when we saw running backs fall, even Devin Neal, we saw running backs fall to the second half of the second day. And we said, based on what we watched or based on something like your wonderful model, these guys are good NFL prospects. And there they are in the 6th or 7th round. And people are going to point and say, but the chances of a 7th round pick hitting are this percent. But this wasn't that kind of class.
Yeah.
Jordan James was a 5th round pick and he was Kyle Shanahan's pick.
Yeah.
Now Shanahan has famously misfired on some guys like Isaac Correndo, Joe Williams,
yes.
Trey Sermon. But Jordan James is different. Jordan James is like Monangai. He doesn't have gaudy measurables. Yeah. He's more like Bucky Irving, another Oregon back, where it's just the way he plays the game. And we know that in Shanahan's run scheme, it's the decision making, it's the vision that is way more important than the tools. That's why I was really shocked by him with Isaac Corendo. Yeah. And I think I just heard something very recently. I think James had like a knee and then like a finger or hand or something. But Kyle Shanahan said something about him in the last week or two that was like, oh, no, we haven't forgot about Jordan James. He just hasn't had a chance And I'm thinking next year he's probably the backup to Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
When we're all like, oh, McCaffrey's going to stay healthy, right?
Yeah, right.
At wide receiver, I want to emphasize Kyle Williams.
Yeah.
Because we know Drake May is good.
It's flashed.
And Kyle Williams, in the small opportunities he's got, looks like a game breaker. He looks like he could be a sort of Jameson Williams light in this offense.
Yep.
And speaking of Jameson Williams, Isaac Tesla, let's not forget about him. He wasn't supposed to be nearly this good.
Right.
Yet.
Right.
Yet. Now, I don't know when the opportunity is going to come for him. And then at tight end, I'm going position by position. Terrence Ferguson is really fascinating.
Yeah, we're recording this before Thursday Night Football, but I'm very interested to see how, and this will release after Thursday Night Football, so you guys will already have this answer. But I'm very interested to see how they deploy Ferguson in particular with Devontae Adams out, because if there's a 1-to-1, Colby Parkinson's a fine play in my opinion, but like if there's a 1-to-1 of what Devontae Adams brings to the table in that offense, it's Terrence Ferguson. Like that, like he's built like that, and he's the prototypical Darren Waller type pass catching tight end, that can make those crazy plays. I love that call. The model really like Terrence Ferguson too.
And I'll add a couple more things to Terrence Ferguson. Okay. Number one, and I didn't even know this until I was joking, but sure enough, like 4 years ago, Sean McVay actually did say, like, I really like Arthur Smith. I really like what Arthur Smith's doing. I'm watching what Arthur Smith's doing and I'm learning from it. Because now all of a sudden, what is Sean McVay enamored with? 3 tight end
heavy sets. Yeah.
And the other thing here is that after they traded down, they were trying to trade up. Some people think it's Colston Love and some people think it's Sarah McMillan. They were trying to trade up with the Panthers. And then when they were unsuccessful, they traded down. And James Gladstone, who's now the GM for the Jags, there's a really cool piece on The Athletic where Mike Silver was given just complete access to the Jags draft room. Mm-hmm. Like he was allowed to just report everything. Yeah. He gave you like a fly on the wall perspective. And Gladstone comes out of the Rams organization, and when the Rams were on the clock, he asked Gladstone, like, who are the Rams going to take here? He said, Terrence Ferguson.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's a pick. I'm getting some chills as I'm recounting this, because it feels like one of those preordained kind of things that Sean McVay is going to evolve. Yeah. And can a tight end be a primary target in a Sean McVay offense? I think we're going to find out the answer is yes. Well,
the sick part about Sean McVay is that even when he has these 3 tight ends on the field, he'll still run 11 personnel with them and do this and line them up as wide receivers.
But you know why? You know why? Because he learned when he lost the Super Bowl to Bill Belichick.
Yeah.
First of all, Belichick did 2 things in that game. One was he would show Jared Goff one defense when the speaker was still open, up to 15 seconds. Yeah. And then after the 15 seconds was cut off, Belichick would switch it up and Goff, smoke would come out of his ears.
Right.
The other thing was the Rams defense was also Aaron Donald, right? Pitt football.
Pitt, baby.
Aaron Donald was ball. I mean, he's Aaron Donald. This defense was great. And in the last drive, Josh McDaniels, they did 22 personnel, 2 tight ends and 2 running backs, but they spread the field. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the Rams, and they hadn't practiced that all year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was at the end of the game. It was their touchdown drive.
Yeah.
So trust your players.
Yeah.
Do things, coaches that trust their players to do things they've never shown they can do before, but in the game situation, they know. So Sean McVay learned him, because remember, that was the game that before the game, McVay goes out to center field, to midfield, and he's like telling Belichick, like, "Oh my God, you're so amazing."
Yeah, yeah.
And observers, we saw that after the fact. He lost the game right there.
Yeah, yeah.
They already lost the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But Sean McVay realized, like, I have to be like him, not admire him.
Right.
I have to be as smart as him.
Yeah. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier about football being the game that we love, because you can be so creative within the boundaries of those rules. And that's exactly what McVay has brought to the table. I want to talk about really quick some of these. What we got to talk a little bit about the remaining playoffs. Week 16, 17. Yeah. Is there any player in fantasy who has helped us get here to the semis that you think could maybe not do so great over the next couple of
I'm worried about Josh Jacobs, man. I mean, I'm not putting him on my bench.
Yeah.
But he's told us, I think it was at the game against the Giants that he took a hit on the knee.
Yeah, on the turf.
And his knee stiffened up.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't play the next week, not because of pain, but because he hadn't gotten the range of motion back.
Right.
And then on Thanksgiving, he had to leave to have the knee checked out. They said against Chicago, the knee was not responding well by the end of the game. That put last week's game in question. Then he actually hurt his knee again last week. He had the 40-yard touchdown run and looked good. But JJ, man, I mean,
scary.
I would be more surprised if he made it through the next 2 games without incident than if he had to leave, because kudos to Josh Jacobs. Like, may we all have the indefatigable spirit of Josh Jacobs, because he said something. I don't remember exactly how he put it, JJ, but he said it hurts more to watch a game from the sidelines than it does to play hurt, right?
Yeah.
And I love that spirit. And I want to tell everybody, I'm looking in the camera as I say this, like, when you're setting your lineups this week, I want you to really think about it like you're in the locker room, you're looking at these players, and you're thinking, like, it is my season. Who are we trusting?
Yeah.
Who are we trusting with the season on the line? And I want to trust a guy like Josh Jacobs because he has that spirit, but I know that means that he's going to push his body to the limit in a way that he doesn't. I mean, even this week, I'm not sure he's going to play this week.
Yeah.
He's already saying, like, my knee's not feeling great.
Yeah. I mean, his snap shares have not been that strong, like even when he's been active, they're still using plenty of Emmanuel Wilson. And I think even from Green Bay's perspective, this is a big game for them, obviously, against Chicago. And so I think you always have to think and have the mentality of, like, okay, how big is the game? Can they push it? Will they push it? This is why when people ask about, like, players getting shut down at the end of the year, I always say players want to play. They want to be on the field. Look at what Joe Burrow's doing right now. He just wants to play. But if they are 90% in terms of health and they don't have a meaningful game, then they might sit out, versus if they were 90% or even 80% playing in a meaningful game, right? And so because this is meaningful, he's going to probably push it, I would imagine, to some degree.
Yeah.
But Emmanuel Wilson's not looked bad in relief. Like they have players, even a Waldman favorite in Chris Brooks.
Chris Brooks, yeah.
He's been a solid enough player for them back there too. But yeah, I would agree. I'm a little bit nervous about Jacobs as well. Are there any under the radar league winners the next couple of weeks, like guys that just haven't been very productive that could be on the waiver wire?
I keep mentioning him. I'm getting drunk on Audric Estime. It's New Orleans. It's New Orleans, right? I'm getting drunk on Audric Estime. The Jets and the Titans. And this gets to philosophical things about fantasy football. What is the most important factor when you're making a lineup decision? Well, it should be on a case-by-case basis, because matchup is important, but matchups are only important at the extreme ends.
Right.
But the Jets and the Titans are the extreme end of just poor defenses.
Yeah.
And the Saints, they don't care. Normally at this time of year, when teams are 4-10, we're like, well, they're just mailing it in. No. They're building something here.
Yeah.
Remember, we consider Kellen Moore an offensive genius, right? Look at the Eagles' offense last year compared to this year, right? Tyler Shuck, again, we joked, give every quarterback 7 years in college. Well, maybe actually these new NIL rules may allow quarterbacks to develop and be more ready, right? You know what I mean? Yep. It's like the first time you ask a girl out on a date. Like, I mean, it might go really poorly, but if you're more mature, it might go a lot better, Yeah. The offensive line is good for the Saints, and they're not playing like a team playing out the string. They're playing, I mean, they beat the Bucks and the Panthers on the road.
Yeah.
They're the best team in the division right now. The Jets just got their defensive coordinator fired.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Titans Shadur Sanders looked like he might be an NFL quarterback against the Titans.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is one of those things where, and it might be Evan Hall, but
yeah, I was going to ask about that. Do you see it being a big? I've had a really hard time. This is why I'm now want to dig into this a little bit more. But I've had a hard time because their deployment last week in a small sample was kind of odd, because Evan Hall was a good, I don't remember if you remember, like, prospect.
Oh, Northwestern, yeah.
Like, good pass catching prospect.
Good athlete.
Yeah, that's like what he did. And then Audric Estime was just the bruiser in college. Like, he didn't do that much through the air. You would never look at him and say, that's our pass catching back. But then last week, and how they played that when they were in that negative and trailing game script, Estime was that guy. He was the 2-minute back. And And Evan Hall was more of the early down back. And so I'm really like, I've had such a hard time like trying to, because it seems like everyone's going down the Estime route. And I've just had this really hard time because I overthink everything of just like which one of these guys is, or is it going to just be a true 50-50 and you just prefer Estime because you like the talent profile a little bit more?
Or just that Estime made plays to help them win last week. And you saw the burst. And whether it's Estime or Hall, the other thing, the reason why, and we could bring up the name Jawar Jordan here too, although Nick Chubb's back in practice. We'll see about Woody Marks, maybe, probably. Who knows? Woody Marks, the rookie who gets veteran rest on a Wednesday.
By the way, have you? I mean, this is Woody Marks is the Deontay Johnson of running backs of just getting like he is in the blue tent every single
He has a magazine that he goes in there and like reads a new article every time he goes back to the tent.
It's really unbelievable. Him and Marshawn Lloyd both coming from USC like that, and just constantly injured. But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. So I think that you also have the reason this happens, if you want to go deep, I mean, people will remember players like D Brown. There's been so many players over the years in week 16, week 17. It's because they're fresh.
Yeah, right.
It's because they're fresh and they're playing defenses that are beat up.
Yeah.
So that's, and I just think, Evan Hall did get the 2 red zone opportunities over Estime, but Estime is the more classic. Like you said, this is kind of backwards. Hall was more of the versatile back, and Estime was more the between the tackles pounder. Right. I just know that the Saints offense is a wave that I want to catch right now.
Yeah, no, it's fair. I just wanted to, I genuinely don't know, with the running backs, just because of what we saw last week. And I agree. You would think that Estime would be rewarded based on how he kind of performed in that small sample. But it's just, this is the downside of running back play. Whereas like a Michael Carter, I don't know if you saw the Gannon.
Yeah, that's safer.
Yeah, the Gannon quote where he was like, I really trust him and he can carry a big workload and he can do it. So I'm like, I'm going to ride Michael Carter. And I would assume that you would be riding Michael Carter over one of the Saints backs, yes?
Yeah, I've got Carter ahead of Estime. But for instance, I'm agonizing over like Estime versus Ken Walker the third as a flex.
Right. Some of those like guys who just are not giving us anything at the moment.
Right. I have this nagging feeling that after like the first 2 or 3 drives of the Saints Jets game, we're going to say like, why were we talking ourselves out of playing Estime?
Yeah. No, it's fair. All right. Before I let you go, I've been doing this with every Perspectives guest.
Yeah.
Bold prediction for week 16. Let's hear it.
Jalen Coker, baby.
Oh, I love it. You have him in Apex, don't you? I think you have him in the Apex league.
I do. And my wide receivers are so bad I have to play him. But there's another league. Listen to this, JJ. There's another league where you can play up to 5 wide receivers.
Yeah.
I'm playing in the toilet bowl. Okay. Every dynasty league should have two public service announcements, because chances are, if you're into JJ stuff, you're into my stuff, you're listening to fantasy football, watching fantasy football this late. If you have a dynasty league, it should have a toilet bowl, and the prize should be either the number 1 overall pick or an extra first round pick at the end of the first round.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
To keep everybody interested.
Yeah.
And then you combine that with no trade deadline.
Yeah. So you're a no trade deadline.
No trade deadline is so good.
Yeah. I've always been a right before the playoff trade deadline guy. But give me the argument for no trade deadline.
Well, it's wonderful chaos.
Yeah, it is chaos. I mean, that's for sure.
It's wonderful though. I mean, it gives you something, even if you're like a last place team.
Yeah, that's true.
You can look at people's starting lineups and rosters. What if they just lost Patrick Mahomes?
Yeah.
And you've been sitting here, with CJ Stroud on your bench wondering, am I ever going to be able to trade him?
Yeah.
But then when you have the toilet bowl, you also have the incentive of, maybe I want to keep my good players so I can get that number 1 pick or that extra first round pick.
Yeah.
So it gives you, but listen to this. I can play 5 wide receivers. My first 4 are basically set. Mike Evans, Puka Nacua, Zay Flowers, and Wan'Dale Robinson. It's a PPR.
Yeah.
It's Jackson Dart. And then my last choice is down to Justin Jefferson or Jalen Coker. And man, like, I can't think of a reason to play Justin Jefferson over Jalen Coker. We saw what Kyle Pitts did against Tampa last week.
Yeah.
And Matt Waldman, I'm going to mention, I have to mention him like 5 times a show. Matt Waldman has been excellent at chronicling this. The one guy who can roast man coverage right now in the Panthers offense is Jalen Coker, not Tedero McMillan.
Mm-hmm.
Jalen Coker. And you've seen teams really put the clamps on McMillan.
Yeah.
And you've seen Coker come through now 2 games in a row with massive plays.
Yeah.
I mean, just Bryce Young knows if I trust that guy, good things happen. If this turns into a shootout, Jalen Coker could be the key to winning this week.
I love it. I mean, he was a sleeper on my sleeper show this week. He was an ad on the 15 transaction show. I'm starting him in over. I mean, mine's a little bit easier. I'm starting him over Stephon Diggs just because Diggs is just not running at all right now. But yeah, man, that's a very good call. I've got a best ball team that desperately needs that game to shoot out desperately. Cause it's got Bryce Young at quarterback. Actually has Tedero McMillan as a wideout and then a Bucky Irving bring back. But I would love for that game to shoot out in some way. It would be great. But man, this was great. As always, I love you're one of my favorites in the space to sit down and talk to, partially because we approach this in different ways. And I think it's just really interesting to get your viewpoint on this stuff, because I don't think of things the same way that you do and probably vice versa. And so, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. You're an OG. You were the OG on Perspectives too. So it's great to bring you back. Thank you so much for coming. Let everyone know where they can find you and what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you can find me down in New Orleans and JJ, come on down.
I know.
Come on down to New Orleans.
I need to.
Everyone needs more New Orleans.
I love New Orleans.
I want to be the ambassador for everybody to New Orleans because I want to show them why I love the city so much. And also you need New Orleans in your life.
Yeah.
But football guys, we're always there. Like, you talked about it at the beginning of the show, like we're tilting. I mean, we are of the people that we are serving, and if we lose that, then what does it matter anyway? Yeah. So yeah, I mean, just we're obsessing about all this. And since I mentioned it, playoff fantasy football, I'll be putting my playoff fantasy football ranks out, a few days after week 18 is over, usually by Tuesday. So this is a great year to dabble in that. It's fun. You can score it by hand. You can do it among your friends over lunch. You can do your draft at lunch.
Yeah.
Back to the roots of fantasy football and our love of this game and sharing it with our friends. And I was happy to be back. This is a great joy also to see how far you've come in your career, and so many other people.
Yeah.
Y'all are growing up into great thought leaders and personalities, and I'm in awe sometimes at how this thing has just kind of sprung up, and we've found our people, and then in turn we found our people and the people that we serve. And all of you, if you're listening to the show, if you're part of JJ's tribe, you're doing good.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Appreciate everyone for tuning in as always. Bloom, you're the man. Hopefully we get to do this again soon. But otherwise, everyone, good luck in your semifinal. And as always, thanks for tuning in.